Last season, if you didn't draft Travis Kelce, George Kittle, or Zach Ertz, possibly Eric Ebron, then most weeks, tight ends were pretty bare. Well, in 2019, as long as you didn't wait too long to draft one, that might not be the case. And on Sundays, you won't be stuck looking at your lineup, and your tight end will be bare. I didn't mean it that way. Hey, what's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle coming to you from the Draft.com studios. And like I said in the entrance to the video, the tight end position may not be nearly as bare as it was last season. And yes, I'm talking about the position, not anything else. But with that being said, you might have a lot more options on Sundays now, and that's a good thing. So let's run through the matchups in week one and determine who you should have in your lineup and who you should have on your bench. All right, for our first matchup, it's the Green Bay Packers at the Chicago Bears on Thursday night. And honestly, for the tight end position here, I'm going to fade everybody this week. Trey Burton's dealing with an injury. He may not even be ready to go. As of this recording, it had not been determined whether or not he would miss the matchup. And then his replacement, Adam Shaheen, I don't think we can trust him in this matchup. He's a decent play actually in DFS for Thursday night if you're playing DFS because his price tag is like $600. So he's a decent play to try and maximize the rest of your lineup. But in terms of redraft leagues, I would go ahead and skip on him. Even if you own Trey Burton, I would find somebody else to maybe go out there and stream for this week. And then Jimmy Graham, I thought about it a little bit, but this is a really good Chicago Bears defense at home on Thursday night. I like Aaron Rodgers this week. I think he'll be just fine, but I don't think Jimmy Graham is going to be the guy to get him there. So, again, if you own Jimmy Graham as your tight end one, which hopefully you don't because his ADP was so low this year, probably would have had to wait a long time on tight end to get him as your one. But with that being said, if you own him as your tight end one, then stream somebody else this week, and we'll talk about one of those guys here shortly that is on the waiver wire. But Jimmy Graham's a hard no for me as well. All right, when the Tennessee Titans head to Cleveland, I have both of these tight ends as starts this week. Definitely going to start David Njoku until he proves differently to me. I think his touchdown upside each week is just way too high to leave him on the bench. We need to monitor that closely. If for some reason he's not getting the volume or the touchdowns sustained being in your lineup, then pivot and switch to someone else. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and roll with him. Now with Delanie Walker, he's had a little bit, he's hit the Cleveland Browns a little bit in the newspapers this week, talking about how hype they are. But that's okay. He's coming back from injury, and I'm actually going to play him this week if I own him. Now in 2018, and again, these are 2018 stats. I know a lot has changed, but the Cleveland Browns last season were not very good at stopping tight ends. They gave up 14.74 points per matchup to tight ends last year. That was second most in the National Football League. This defense is a lot better, so they might still be able to shut him down and shut this offense down, and you have to rely on Marcus Mariota, which none of us really want to do. But I'll take a gamble on him. I'll take a gamble on Delanie Walker. He could get more than enough volume, being Mariota's favorite target, to be a decent play this week, and then we'll continue to monitor that situation, and that starting quarterback as the weeks move forward. For Baltimore and Miami this week, the only player that I'm going to start at tight end is going to be Mark Andrews. Now, he's a guy that is less than 50% owned right now. So when I was talking about your tight end one and finding a streaming option, Mark Andrews could be a guy that is still sitting around in your league right now. Now, the one thing with Miami is that their defense is horrible, so you have to hope that Andrew hits early and he hits often. If Andrews doesn't return that value in the first half, Baltimore might run away with the game, and then Andrews might not get nearly as much work in the second half because then they'll shift to the two players that I have listed in the sit column, either Hayden Hurst or Nick Boyle. Boyle's a much better blocking tight end. Hayden Hurst has really good hands, but Mark Andrews is the playmaker. He's the guy that can make the big plays. So the hope is if you start Mark Andrews this week, that he gives you that upside in the first half, maybe scores a touchdown, gets 3 or 4 catches, puts together a nice day in the first half, and then if the Baltimore Ravens shift to using Boyle or Hurst more in the second half, you're fine because Andrews has already put that up. But I think he's a good streaming option because of his upside this week. Anyway, as far as it goes for the Miami Dolphins, Gesicki is not a guy that I can buy into right now. I was really hoping coming into the season that maybe he would grow a little bit more, but outside of one or two big catches that you see in training camp, he hasn't really done anything, and he hasn't grown. He's a pass catcher. That's what he is. He's going to catch passes. He's a very good athlete, but he isn't doing a whole lot of other things right in the time being. So we have to wait and see what happens with him. But this Baltimore Ravens defense is going to get after the Miami Dolphins. They just lost their left tackle to trade. So Ryan Fitzpatrick may have a difficult time finding open men today, Gesicki, or on Sunday, and Gesicki might not be able to get himself open in time for Fitzpatrick to get rid of the ball. So we're going to go ahead and pass on him as well, and we'll focus on Mark Andrews in this situation instead. As much as some of you may want to grab Austin Hooper and put him in your lineup right away after the breakout in 2018, I'm going to caution you this week against the Vikings defense. I'm also going to put Kyle Rudolph on the bench and Irv Smith Jr. if any of you were thinking about playing them either. Now, here's the thing. In my quarterback video, I do talk about how this could be an offensive shootout. However, I don't believe the tight ends are going to get a whole lot of play in this game in terms of fantasy upside. Because in 2018, these two teams were really, really good at shutting down opposing tight ends. The Minnesota Vikings only gave up 9.23 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. That was sixth least in the National Football League. Atlanta was right there with them, 9.43 points to tight ends per game, 10th least. So both of these teams last season, very, very good at shutting down opposing tight ends. Let's wait and see what happens. Again, a lot has happened this offseason, so we are going off numbers from last year. These defenses could change. However, without seeing them yet this year, we just have to go off the information that we have. We'll play it safe in week one. Find yourself a different streaming option, because even if these guys do make any kind of a play, more than likely their upside is going to be very limited. For the Bills and Jets matchup this week, I'm going to be sitting any tight end that's near that field. Whether it be Dawson Knox from the Buffalo Bills or anybody from the New York Jets while Chris Herndon serves his 4-game suspension, I'm staying away right now. And the reason is that these two teams in 2018 were the only two teams to allow less than 7 points per game to opposing tight ends. Both of these defenses are just as good, if not better, this season. So I can't imagine that either one will allow these tight ends, especially ones that really don't have a ton of upside, to burn them on Sunday. If you have these tight ends, just stash them firmly on your bench for right now. Maybe things will get better as the season goes on, but this matchup is too tough. Find options elsewhere. When Washington heads into Philadelphia this weekend, obviously, Zach Ertz is 100% must start if you own him. He's in the lineup. But what about if you own Dallas Goedert? Well, I'll put him in the lineup this week. And the main reason for that is I expect Philadelphia to put quite the beating on Washington this week. Their offense is in a state of array. They don't have very good wide receivers right now. Their offensive line is in shambles. It is Case Keenum, up and down career so far. What are we going to get from him in Washington? So you know what? If Philadelphia can go in and run the first half, Zach Ertz could see a little bit of time on the bench in the second half, and Goddard could go out and grab himself some garbage time catches. We'll see what happens. I do expect there to be at least, I wouldn't say 50-50 workload, but something in the area. I think you're going to see Dallas Goedert on the field a lot more often this year. So if you own him, I'm okay starting him this week or even streaming him if you have a tight end one that we talk about here that you're not going to play. I'll take the risk with Goddard because I think he has some second half upside for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, when it comes to the Redskins, whether it be Jordan Reed or Vernon Davis, Jordan Reed still feeling the effects of his concussion, is doubtful, I believe, as of right now to play this week. They don't expect him to be on the field. That could change, though. Again, at this recording, they don't expect him to be on the field, it looks like. But even if Vernon Davis were to make it out there, the Eagles gave up the third least amount of points to tight ends on a point-per-game basis last year. So I have a tough time dealing with this lineup this week just because even though they're going to have to throw the ball a lot because they're probably going to be down by quite a bit, I don't think that Case Keenum's going to get more than enough time to be able to hit these guys. If I were to play anybody this week, it would be Chris Thompson because he's probably going to get a ton of dump-offs. But with that being said, I'm going all in on the Eagles tight ends this week, and I'm going to stay away from the Redskins tight ends. Again, another matchup that I think could put up plenty of points, but will lack any kind of upside for the tight ends, whether it be Greg Olsen or Higbee or Everett from the Los Angeles Rams. Now, I like some of these players, but I just don't like them this week. Greg Olsen, I got to see him back on the field, 100% healthy. I know he's Cam Newton's favorite target, but they have a lot more weapons than they've had in years past. I mean, Curtis Samuel is headed for a breakout year. Obviously, DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey can catch the ball out of the backfield. So he has so many options at this point. He doesn't need to rely on Greg Olsen like he did in the past. Now with the Rams tight ends, it's just too difficult to predict what could happen with them on a week-to-week basis. You have Cooks, you have Woods there. Obviously, you also have Cooper Kupp, who is back from his knee injury. Todd Gurley, Darrell Henderson. It doesn't matter. There's so many pass-catching options that really, if you were to start a Rams tight end, you're hoping for one touchdown. And that's going to make or break, because that's probably going to be one of only two, maybe three catches that they have the entire game. There's just not nearly enough upside. So the only time I probably would focus on playing any of those guys is if the matchup was really, really good for them, or you were decimated by injuries or bye weeks. So for right now, we're going to put everybody on the bench for this matchup. In this matchup, we have the locked and loaded tight end one in Travis Kelce. He's going to be in your lineup no matter what. But what about on the other side of the football with the Jaguars? Well, that's going to be Jeff Swaim, who is over from the Dallas Cowboys this offseason and may present a nice little bit of upside that is under the radar. Last season, the Kansas City Chiefs gave up over 14 points per game to opposing tight ends. So if this is a game where the Kansas City Chiefs start to run away with it a little bit, Nick Foles has to pass, Jeff Swaim could be a guy that gets a nice amount of targets in the second half of the game. Keep an eye on him. If your tight end one is listed anywhere in this video as a sit, then take a look at Swaim, maybe grab him off the waiver wire and start him this week. And again, a nice bit of potential upside with some volume that could come this week and give you more than enough points to help you on your way to victory in Fantasy Football Week 1. What can you expect out of the Colts offense this week? Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to expect enough out of Eric Ebron or Jack Doyle to put them in my lineup. We got to wait and see what happens with Jacoby Brissett. I do think he's going to be a lot better than he was in 2017, and he relied on Jack Doyle a lot that season. However, I need to see how things play out because this is an offense now that is much different with many more weapons. So we're going to temper expectations a little bit, and I think you find a different option this week if you own either of these guys. Now, with that being said, Hunter Henry is a must-play for me this week. This Colts defense gave up well over 14 points per game, the third most in all of football last season to opposing tight ends. He is a must-start for me this week, and he is a guy that I'm going to heavily rely on in a lot of leagues, maybe even in some DFS lineups. Hunter Henry could have himself a nice week, his first full game back in quite some time. I'm excited to see him on the field. He's going to be a huge target for Phillip Rivers, and he's going to return awesome value this week against the Colts. Another matchup here where, quite frankly, I'm not interested in any of the tight ends this week. With Tyler Eifert, I thought about him a little bit more than the other tight ends. However, I think he only presents touchdown upside. And with Andy Dalton missing two offensive linemen right now, what are we going to get from this offense? Are they going to struggle to move the football? And even if they do, what are they going to do when they get into the red zone where Tyler Eifert's value is going to be the highest? Well, right now, I'm just going to hold off and I'm going to see what happens. I'm not going to invest too much in Tyler Eifert right now. Maybe he's a streaming option later in the season, but I need to see him healthy and on the field before I go too far with that. This matchup brings up one of my favorite tight ends for the 2019 season in Evan Ingram. Can he get off to a fast start? It's possible against the Dallas Cowboys defense that gave up the 7th most points to opposing tight ends last season. However, this linebacking core that they have here can easily keep up with tight ends. Jalen Smith can run with them. Leighton Vander Esch can run with them. Both of these guys have the athletic ability to do that. So that's the only thing I'm going to caution you on. With Vander Esch being on the field a lot more this season, him or Jalen Smith could be used to move back and forth. Probably not Jalen Smith nearly as much, but they could do a little bit of a shadow over the top on them, run with them a little bit just to bump them off their route. They could do a lot of different things with such athletic linebackers. We'll keep an eye on that. I'm still going to play Evan Ingram this week. I think he can have a very good week. And on the other side of the football with Jason Witten, he's not going to be a start for me anytime soon. He's out of retirement, a great leader, but not a fantasy asset right now. This week in Arizona, I'm not finding any tight ends that I'd like to put into my lineup. Now, I know a lot of you are excited for TJ Hawkinson, but I need to see what kind of work he does in this offense first, and I need to see how aggressive they are with the run game. But not only that, over the past few weeks, there's been some reports that TJ Hockenson is going to sit behind Jesse James for the time being. If they run the football a lot this week, Jesse James is going to be a guy that they're going to rely on a little bit more at the beginning to block. Now, TJ Hockenson is an excellent blocker. However, they'll probably rely on James to start with, and Hockenson will work his way into that role as the season moves on. Here in week one, it's a little too much of a gamble for me. I'm going to go a different route, and I'm going to find somebody to stream instead of putting Hockenson in my lineup. There's not much more to say about this matchup other than it's going to be fun to watch these two tight ends battle. George Kittle and O.J. Howard, top 5 tight ends this season. Both of them have extreme upside in this matchup. If you've drafted them, if you own them, they're in your lineup. Expect some big weeks against two defenses that maybe are not going to be on top of their game. One of my favorite tight ends to own this season, Vance McDonald. We're going to go ahead and toss him in the lineup right away. With all of those vacated targets in Pittsburgh, he could end up having himself a decent game, especially here in week one. If Bill Belichick's defense decides to basically take away the main targets, Juju Smith-Schuster or whoever the wide receiver 2 is, that could leave a lot of room for Vance McDonald to wander around and see some nice value, especially at the beginning of the season when, like a Dante Moncrief, may not make that big of an impact right away as he continues to develop some of that relationship with Ben Roethlisberger. Now, James Washington, that could be a guy that comes out and has an impact in week one. But Vance McDonald, I expect to see plenty of targets this week. As long as he catches those targets, he'll have all the volume you need to be a sustainable tight end one. Against the Houston Texans, Drew Brees' new weapon, Jared Cook, needs to be in your lineup. Obviously, a lot of upside here in a matchup that could be back and forth with a lot of points scored. With that being said, though, nobody from Houston. At this point, they have far too many receiving weapons for them to be worried about using their tight end very often. That's not going to happen much. Maybe a couple of catches here and there, but more than likely, Houston's tight ends will be a sit for me every single week this season. Far too many options, far too many weapons. None of the tight ends fit into that, though. Last but not least, out in Oakland, we're definitely going to start Darren Waller this week. I've talked about him far too many times this season not to have him in my lineup right away. He is probably one of the most athletic tight ends in the league, and you might laugh when I say that right now, but keep an eye on him this season. He has the athleticism needed to put up some pretty decent numbers at the position. This is a guy that has tight end one upside on a weekly basis. With that being said, though, the tight ends from the Denver Broncos, we're going to go ahead and put them on the bench this week. I don't think Joe Flacco is going to look to them too many times. This is a game that could end up turning into more of a shootout. Again, Oakland's defense is not that good. However, I expect Emmanuel Sanders to be used quite often. Deshaun Hamilton, Cortland Sutton, Phillip Lindsay, a lot of options there ahead of the tight ends. I don't see a whole lot of upside, so we're going to pass on them and we'll take a shot at somebody else instead. There you have it, folks. Start sit tight ends for week one. Good luck to everybody this week. And make sure if you have any questions that you let us know in the comments below. We'll respond to as many as we possibly can. But don't forget our live shows. That's one of the best interactions, one of the best chances to ask us as many questions as you can. We try to answer as many questions as possible. We hope to be streaming this Thursday and on Saturday as well. The main live show Saturday evenings. Make sure you put that in your calendar and join us all season long. Make sure, though, before you leave this video, hit that like button for us. And more importantly, if you haven't joined Headliner Nation yet, hit that subscribe button. I want to personally welcome you to Headliner Nation, so let us know in the comments below. And this awesome community would also like to welcome you. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one, everyone.